Hi, I'm Benton Stokes.
And I'm Elane O'Rourke.
And this is Cocktail Theology. So do you know what today is?
No?
As we record this, today is Repeal Day.
Repeal Day.
It's Repeal Day.
Does that refer to the repellation? Repealing of Prohibition?
It does. So as we record this, today in 1933 was the passage of the 21st Amendment to the Constitution of the United States, which was...
ensured the right to drink?
I guess. It repealed the nationwide ban on alcoholic beverages.
Who knew? I guess someone did, because you
Somebody did.
You did. Wow. So how are we celebrating Repeal Day?
So we are celebrating with a cocktail called the Scofflaw. And so the Scofflaw came to be...
From someone who scoffed at the law?
Yes.
Okay.
So there was a contest. This is hilarious. So there was a contest by Delsavari, I don't know how you say this, Delsavari King, who was a famous prohibitionist.
Ooh.
And the contest asked people to coin a term to describe a lawless drinker.
Really?
And the winner of the contest, the word was Scofflaw.
I mean, I love that. I didn't know that's how it came about.
That's how it came about.
Okay.
So then there was a bar in Paris called Harry's New York Bar.
Yes, I know Harry's.
And it's kind of famous.
Uh-huh.
And so there was a bartender there who came up with a drink called the Scofflaw in honor of Prohibition in the United States.
Love that so much.
Yeah. So this cocktail is based around rye whiskey, which was, of course, a spirit you couldn't get during Prohibition.
At least not officially.
Not officially. That's right. It also has dry vermouth in it. It has a tiny bit of grenadine, some lemon juice, some orange bitters. But that's about it.
Okay. Now that sounds really good. I like it.
It's kind of dry, kind of basic. Mm-hmm. But
the grenadine just barely comes through. It's interesting.
Barely there. It didn't ask for very much.
Yeah. But like you can kind of taste it towards the end. Mm-hmm. You know? Interesting. Well, I find it interesting that you chose a scofflaw for today's discussion.
Do you know?
I do. Of course, now that I know the derivation of the word, I'm less amused by it. But still.
Yeah.
I like that you chose the scofflaw on a day when we're talking about moral authority. Mm-hmm. So could you help our listeners understand why we're talking about moral authority at all?
Sure. So a few years ago, I became aware of an Instagram account called Preachers and Sneakers. Sort of the point of this account, if you haven't seen it, is it'll show a picture of a celebrity preacher.
Okay.
And it will make note of what he or she is wearing. And it's not limited to just sneakers, but what the creator of this account was doing was pointing out the excess in what these celebrity preachers were spending on their clothes. So, for instance, like one of the recent posts that I saw had Stephen Furtick, who's the senior pastor at Elevation Church, big church in Charlotte.
Right.
Anyway, he's a very famous celebrity preacher, and he was wearing sneakers that he got on sale for $400, but they generally retail for around $900. And that's like on the low end of some of these pictures that he will show of these preachers wearing these like really expensive, Balenciaga sneakers, or carrying, a really expensive Gucci bag or whatever. He's kind of pointing out the excess in these celebrity preachers. Okay. And as you can imagine, he's gotten a lot of flack for it. Members of their churches or people who enjoy their sermons on TV or whatever. But he continues to do this. He feels like this is something that needs to be pointed out. Okay. He's not badgering the preachers in what he says. He's simply pointing out. He's showing a picture, zooming in on the sneakers. Retail price for these sneakers is this.
And so what is his point about this? Why is he doing this?
Well, I think the reason that he's doing this has a lot to do with, he's kind of posing the question, I guess. Who do we trust to guide our morality? Okay. And is spending even $400 on a pair of sneakers a wise choice for someone who has put themselves in a position of moral authority, in a position of an expert on the Bible, in a purveyor of doctrine, theology, etc.?
Okay.
Is that a wise use of money?
Okay.
And I mean, you could talk about sports cars, you could talk about big houses, you could talk about all those kinds of things.
Private planes, whatever.
All of that stuff, right?
Okay.
And I mean, if anybody's, seen even a tiny bit of the Righteous Gemstones, it's kind of making fun of this entire thing, right?
Sure.
But that's, I think, where he's coming from. And so I think one of the reasons why we want to talk about moral authority is that's just one tiny way that moral authority could be questioned in an individual. How do you spend your money? Okay. Especially when you work in an occupation where it's kind of your job to serve people. Or at least that's the perception.
Right.
Certainly another place you can go is politics.
Yes.
You can look at politicians in the news this week. George Santos being expelled from Congress. And many people are scratching their heads and saying, why did it take so long?
Right.
He had been in his seat less than a month before he was already violating ethics.
Right.
And then, of course, the big blaring example of our former president.
As long as we're going to talk about Trump for a minute. As soon as you start bragging about how you can sexually assault women and that's okay. I mean, forget everything else. At that moment, you have said, sexual assault is okay for me. Then the question is, all right, what does that mean? I mean, we know what it means. What does that mean? But what does that mean for us?
And what else is okay for you?
And is it okay for others? And if so, what are you saying about that?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Okay, that makes sense to me. And I understand. And now I understand. Like, there's so many things in that question.
It's so layered.
So I've got multiple questions.
Okay.
One of them is, do we actually think that politicians, pastors, any of those people have moral authority, period, anymore? That's one question. Yeah. I'm not saying we can answer that, but I'm saying I think that there's part of the, like, is moral authority even an issue at this point?
Right.
I mean, I appreciate very much the calling out of expensive goods as raising the question of, is this appropriate for someone who, at least in theory, is serving people? I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering whether at this point in our history, whether that isn't just a naive position. Like, well, of course they don't have, there's no connection, of course. So there's that.
Yeah.
The other questions include, to me, what is moral authority? Like, is there such a thing?
Yeah.
And if so, then how is it conferred? Where does it come from? How, what does it mean for us? And then there's a question of, when we raise up an authority in X, are we also expecting that person to be an authority for us morally?
Right.
So it seems like at this point in our history, all of those things are so blurry and murky that we don't know what to do with it to begin with.
Yeah.
Okay. Does that seem right to you?
No, I think that's absolutely right.
Okay. Okay. So my sigh is coming from the idea of the impoverished or poor preacher was a mainline idea. It was the idea that you pay enough to sustain, but not to enrich. Because there was a sense both that you were serving the people in the community, but also because you were trying to emulate Jesus.
Yeah.
But it also goes along with this kind of conspicuous consumption was not okay in New England, right? Old money did not do conspicuous consumption. And so the mainline has this multiplicity of whys that happens. Okay, so there's one. The other piece of that your pastor should be poor comes out of the not wanting to pay your pastors.
Sure, right.
I mean, just simply not wanting to pay them.
Yeah.
Any kind of service industry, whether you're talking about nannies, or you're talking about teachers, or you're talking about, as a rule, pastors, underpaid, undervalued, expected to work stupid numbers of hours.
Absolutely.
Right. So there's that whole piece as well. Okay, so you've got the serving people, so you shouldn't have a lot of money because it should be going to the people, right? Then you've got the whole, you shouldn't be conspicuously consuming because it's just not done. And then you've got, this other piece about, well, we don't value this work.
Yeah.
So you've got all that in one pocket.
Right.
Then you've got another pocket of, and I didn't know this until I started learning more about African-American history and African-American church history. But for so many years, the Black person in a community, if it was a primarily white community, who was allowed to have a voice and who represented everybody else was the pastor.
Yeah.
Many times, and this has come down through Black church history, the pastor was more, I don't want to say flashy because that's the wrong way to put it, but dressed better, dressed more professionally, that's big scare quotes, right? Suits, dressed in this way that showed more social elevation because they were the authority. They stood for the community.
Right.
Right? So that's a whole different way of thinking about it. If what your pastor's trying to do is to stand for the community in a place where the standards are X, then you want your pastor to hold to those standards because you want them to be accepted into that community.
Right.
So let's stay with that one for a second.
Yeah.
If you're going by that would suggest that what Furtick is trying to do is to represent his community in a world where $400 sneakers are expected.
Yeah.
That's an interesting option right there.
Right.
So then who is the church in bed with is a different kind of question.
Yeah.
So all of that stands around the whole pastoral part of this. But then there's the other piece of where does moral authority come from? And why do we listen to anyone on morality? And I think that for people of faith, of any faith, I don't care what it is, that has to be a living question.
Yeah.
And it has to be grounded in our faith.
Yeah, I think so too.
Right? So that's where I'm starting from. Does that make sense? And are there any kind of teasing more of that before we kind of encounter the moral authority piece?
It does. I think, I think some people don't really look for moral authority from anybody. I think some people desperately look for moral authority.
Yes.
From anybody.
Yes.
So you have those two extremes. Most of us are in the middle. Most of us would like to think that our leaders have some backbone, have some courage, have some moral integrity. We like to have heroes, and we like to have people we can look up to, and we like to have people who demonstrate integrity. Now, whether that translates to moral authority, not always. The guy that saves a baby from a burning building doesn't have to have moral authority.
That's right.
And we still respect the hell out of that person.
Yes.
For having done what they did.
Yep.
But then we have leaders where they're making decisions that impact us all the time. And we have pastors that are in the pulpit telling us how we ought to be living our lives week in and out.
Yes.
And I think we would like to believe that those individuals have some moral character, have some integrity.
Yeah.
So that when they speak, we can believe what they say and we can trust what they say to be true and accurate to the best of their ability. I think that's what we generally would like to see. Okay.
That's where the rubber meets the road. If our pastors are people who are telling us how we should live in the world, and that includes our private behavior as well as our public behavior, then what we're looking for is consistency. We want them to live the way that they're telling us to.
Yes.
So then the question is, going back to your sneakers thing, right? Is the pastor suggesting that people should be conscious of consumption, giving money to the poor, that kind of, giving money to the church?
Right.
And if so, then you want them to show that they are also doing those things.
Right.
Right? So that's, I think, the moral authority question.
Yeah.
So for most of us who are looking to someone in legal authority or positional authority to have moral authority. What we're actually looking for is if they're going to tell us how to live, they better be living that way.
They should be living that way too. Right.
Okay?
Right.
All right. Here's the problem that I have. I think inherent in following Jesus means caring about others as much as you care about yourself.
Yes.
So if I'm wearing a pair of $400 sneakers, I should be giving $400 to somebody who doesn't have sneakers.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's something in that.
Yeah. Right.
One of the reasons I actually admire Rick Warren of Saddleback is at some point he started doing a 95% tithe and a 5% keep.
Yeah.
And to me, that was a sign that he at least tried to take what he was saying seriously.
Right.
That's part of it. We're looking for consistency of message and behavior. Okay? Unfortunately, most of the messaging we're referring to has no sense of moral anything.
No.
So of course they can behave however they want.
Right.
We love a scandal as long as it's not ours.
Yeah.
Right? Scandals are entertaining. So of course we want to see people who can be scandalous in these positions of other kinds of authority. But since you and I are not actually concerned with that, I think a better question might be, how do we want to live as followers of Jesus so that our children, our neighbors, can trust the kind of people we are? And the kind of people we are the kind that Jesus would like us to be.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
And so if I'm looking for a pastor, or I'm looking for a religious authority, I'm going to be looking at how they live because I understand Jesus to be this particular kind of person who actually cares about the poor, who cares about the orphans and widows, who would be appalled by Trump's, enjoyment of his ability to do sexual assault, who would be appalled by that. Right. So to me, where moral authority comes from is that consistency with an understanding of Jesus and right and wrong and relationship that trumps, unfortunately for the word, whether you've got a lot of money, whether you can, any of those things. How are you treating people?
Yeah.
And if you're treating people like scum, or you're telling people it's okay to treat others like scum, you don't have moral authority with me to start with.
No, not at all.
Okay. To me, that's where the issue comes. And it's not about your position. It's not about any of those things. It's, do you understand that other people are at least as valuable as you are?
Yeah.
And are you willing to treat them from a position of love, care, mercy, kindness, justice, all of those places? If not, to me, you have no moral authority, period.
Exactly.
I don't care what position you're in.
Right.
So if I'm going to model my life after anybody besides Jesus, I'm going to be looking towards those people who have the character of Jesus. It doesn't matter what their religion is. None of that matters.
Yeah.
But have the character of what I understand. For me, where morality comes from is one of two places. It either comes from God, the God that I have come to know, or it comes from this idea that if I were in their position, I would want to be treated in this way.
Yeah.
Right? If I didn't know where I was, it's actually called the original position, John Rawls, don't even ask. But if I were in that position, that's how I would want to be treated. That's where moral authority comes from for me. I don't care whether you're president. I don't care whether you're king. I don't care whether you run a company. I don't care if you are the person in the street. It doesn't matter to me. If you're going to tell me how to live, you better be living that way. And then I can choose whether I think you're right about it.
Yes.
Period.
Yes.
And I may not think you're right about it, but I want you to be consistent in it, or at least admit that you're trying to be consistent but fail, and be working on that and working on it with me and trusting, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Or I want you to just shut up about how I should do anything at all.
Exactly.
Because that's not where you're putting your value.
Right.
Done.
Right.
That probably wasn't helpful.
No, that was actually helpful.
I'm wearing my yeah, don't even get me started on sneakers. The idea of $400 sneakers I admit it appalls me. No one needs Balenciaga sneakers.
No one. No one does. It's hard for me to spend, $75 on sneakers.
Well, and I would want you, so here's the other piece of this. I would want you to feel okay in spending $400 on sneakers if it was something you really wanted, but to decide that there were better ways for the world to spend that money. That's what I would want. I would want you to feel worthy of it, but look around and say, there are better ways to spend this money.
Yeah. Listeners, we'd love to hear from you. Cocktailtheology.com is where we are. And in the meantime, we hope that you are having an anticipatory Advent, that you're awaiting expectantly for the coming of Jesus.
And a revelation.
And a revelation celebration. That we can legally drink rye whiskey and whatever else you want.
Or lemonade, whatever.
Or lemonade, if that's your thing. Absolutely. Okay. We appreciate y'all. Bye.
Bye.